thought today, we could talk about something that's coming up quite a bit in coaching business owners, at least for me, and I'd love to hear your experience. And that is, we've got a lot of conflict that happens in businesses and between people. And, often people can think that there's a communication problem, and that's very true. And something that I've noticed quite recently is that people's approach to relationships in the context of their business, context of the tasks that they've got to run, etc. Often there's not enough attention paid to the relationship itself. And so I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about relationships, communications, conflict in businesses, how to get beyond it, how to navigate through it, what to look for, the transformation opportunities available, etc. We can go anywhere and everywhere on this one. And so, love to hear some of your musings on what we might discuss and what you see.
Sure. I think that we don't pay enough attention to the quality of our relating. And we don't set ourselves up for success is my direct experience.
I love that.
That's in the high performance world. Like in high performance sport, I really do experience, and I have experienced it very personally in a lot of lessons myself, the need for us to talk about how do we want to be when the pressure's on? How do we want to be under pressure? How do we want to be in stressful situations? How do we want to handle conflicting ideals and ideas? How do we want to handle conflicting values? And so I don't think many people in business are having those conversations to set an agreement and an understanding, a mutual understanding of how we want to be together and how we want to show up and how we want to, and what's permissible and what's not permissible within that relationship. So that when we get to those points, we've got a framework that scaffolds our ability to hold the relationship whilst holding the task.
I totally love that. There's so many places that I could go. And I'm going to start here, and then I'd love to ask you how we might set ourselves up for success in this and start there, and then we can navigate forward. What I've seen for myself, in my own life and business, and, that translates, I guess, into the coaching that I do, is, what you just said, the relationship is the container for the tasks that are performed.
Right.
And so I always use the analogy, I didn't marry Joe in order to decide who takes the bins out. But it just so happens that life kind of gets in the way and we start to gravitate to who's doing what role, who's taking out the bins, et cetera, et cetera. And we forgot the reason why we do what we do in the first place, which is just to relate. And so this happens in business all the time as well. And, what I'm noticing is that, and what's become really clear to me, particularly in the last few weeks, is that if we don't have a healthy relationship, that's what determines outcomes, and we decide to split from each other, and then there's no context to do the task together anymore. So the relating precedes the performance of the task. And so, I'd really love for you to maybe go back to what you said at the very beginning and just share with us what you mean a little more by setting ourselves up for success. I think that'll be a really great place to start.
So for me, it's focusing on the being before focusing on the doing. So how do we want to be with one another? How do we want to hold one another? How do we want to see one another? What are we referencing when we're having discussions? What is really important to each of us, and how do we expect any differences to play out together? And what's our agreements, what's our plans for focusing back into the being to get the doing done? Because we human beings, because of our stages of development, the earlier stages is the focus on doing. It's the later stages that focus on the being rather than the doing. So we don't really get access to that thinking until we hit a later stage of development, a later stage of maturity. And it was Sharon Drew Morgan, actually, a giant in the world of sales in terms of her thinking. And she would drill in through her writing, relationship first, task second. And
Yeah.
we at the coaching room changed that to relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. I didn't know it came from there. I'd not heard of her work in that context, and that she'd said that literally. That's really good. Okay. So I think a lot of people get confused. Given what you said, it's all about our stages of development and psychological maturity. I think a lot of people get confused with what it means to be with another. And so, just really briefly, at lunch today, I was with two people from a particular business, a couple of clients, and we were standing around a restaurant table outside having a chat, and we were really just about to get down to the actual business. We'd sort of done the rapport building and the warming up and all that, and we were just about to get down to business. And I turned to the CEO and I said, "Put your computer away." And it was a command. It wasn't an ask, actually, because we were trying to set up a space where we could be actually present with each other. And so that's a very, very simple thing, right? But I think a lot of the people that I talk with, they don't really know what it means to be with another. Would you like to share a little bit more about what you make meaning on around being with another?
For me, it starts with listening, and there are levels of listening in our world where we can listen what we call download listening. We can listen for what we think people are saying, and what we're doing with that style of listening is we're bringing all of our own assumptions and all of our own mind reads to the conversation. So what you're saying is, what you mean is, so you're about this, so you don't care about that. This means that. We bring a lot of that thinking to the process, and we all do download listening, where we overlay what we think the person's saying without actually hearing or inquiring with them, which is part of the communication process, is inquiring with them in active listening as to what it is they really mean to communicate. We don't do that very well. And so the next level of listening is really that data listening for data, listening for information, listening for knowledge, listening for understanding, that we're listening for something that is of interest to us, something we can do something with. At the next level of listening, we've got relational listening. And as relational beings, relational listening means that I'm listening in order to relate with you, not to say what I'm thinking next. That would be one of the earlier two stages. This level of listening is I'm listening to you with care, love, kindness, and some openness as to how are you going. I'm listening with compassion. I'm listening with a curious mind, and I want to understand. I'm listening to understand you, not to argue with you or compete with you or any other reason, but to be with you. I'm listening to understand, to create that mutual understanding between us. So I have an inquiring mind. I'm asking a lot of questions. When you say this, what do you mean? And so when you reference, what are you referencing in terms of how you're making sense of that, so that I can understand how you're thinking, so that I can shift and adapt my thinking to your thinking, so that we can meet in that dynamic interplay between us. So and then there's what we call sacred listening, which is open heart, open mind, open gut. There's I am completely present, and Otto Scharmer calls it presencing or presensing, where I lose my mind, as Fritz Perls says, and come to my senses. So I'm here and available in a very sensory specific way. I'm not intuiting our conversation. I'm with the actual conversation as it's being spoken, and that is actively listening means being able to question and understand what it is that the person's really trying to communicate, until I've got the message and I can feed it back to them, and they can go, that's what I'm trying to communicate. That now we've got a mutual understanding. In that moment, there's a sense of, you get me.
Yeah, I've been seen.
How rare is it for a human being to experience being fully seen and fully understood. And that's
Yeah.
what's missing in our relationships from my perspective. We're not very focused on the being side, where, as you say, much more focused on the doing side in our society.
Yeah, 100%. And I love the listening frames. It's really great. Thanks for sharing the 4 listening frames. It's really helpful, practical, way of thinking your way through how to listen. I would add to that just with the sacred listening and the sensory base. I'm looking with my clients whether they're even facing each other, whether there's eye contact, how much they're distracted, whether they're in downtime or whether they're in uptime in the context of the relationship. And so it's just basics like that. Most of the people that I work with, my experience is they can't even actually hold eye contact with the other. And so unconsciously, there's some triggering stuff in the conversation, or there's some defensiveness that's coming to the surface, or there's mind reading and a misalignment of perceived facts, or whatever it is. But they just can't actually hold the two beings in a stillness. And so even if you don't get the 4 frames that Jay was talking to, just check in with yourself. Can you actually be with another? Just physically be with another. That's something I look for all the time, and I'll call it out when I see 2 people interacting on that basis. And it's really helpful for them to have the practical, physical cues too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to share just in terms of, setting up for success in relationships, or more mechanics
what you're talking to there, Andrew, is really intentionality, is intending to be present to another person. And so not unconsciously just being there, talking, communicating to another person, but actually intending to be with them. And so, it starts with a conscious intention of how I want to be with you and how you want to be with me. That starts with that. And that's where the conversation is. What's our intention here? Do we actually intend to connect, to relate, to seek to understand? Do we actually intend to seek? Do we actually intend to be curious and open? What's our intentionality in our relationship? And then given that, what's the outcome we want? Yeah, right. and instead of going, what's the outcome we want? And let's just do everything we can to get that outcome from our own perspectives.
I love
so
that.
Intentionality matters. The second component part is perspectives. Really,
can I just pause you before you go into perspectives and keep going? Because I'd love to share a frame there, and I'd love to inquire that I've understood you correctly too in this. And so you're looking for the intentionality, and you're looking for some sort of shared intentionality. Yeah, that's the presumption.
Shared agreement.
And you referenced an outcome. Now I'm curious, what's the nature of the outcome you're referencing? Is it a relational outcome, or is it a performative outcome?
That's a good point. And that's where perspectives come in. Because perspectives come in terms of, all right, now let's take whatever outcome, whatever perspective you're speaking from when you answer that question, let's take it and run it through all the available perspectives. And let's look at, all right, what is the performance outcome that we want? Given the performance outcome, and what's the relationship outcome we want? What's the environmental outcome we want? What's the shift in understanding, mindset, and intentionality we want? What do we want? And so it becomes a much more holistic outcome than an outcome that is driven by biases.
Love that. Yeah, great. Yeah, I know for myself, in the past, I haven't paid enough attention to, let's say, the relational part of the outcome. And so there might have been discussions about, the mechanics and the process of how to relate. And some shared values, et cetera, and then, but not a focus on the actual outcome of the relation itself. And that's been quite damaging in the long run. And, I actually remember early on thinking that in this particular relationship that I'm talking about, there was a preference for tasks. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember thinking I'm quite a relationally oriented person myself.
Yeah.
And so with a heavy orientation to tasks, I was kind of not sure whether the relating was going to work out in the long term. And it turned out that that's the very thing that was the difference that made the difference. And so there wasn't enough focus placed on the intentionality and the actual outcome of the relating. And so the relating dissolved. And so now all of a sudden we've got all these tasks that we now have to deal with in a different way because the relating's been dissolved. And so I know for me, I've under-preferenced, attention to the quality of the relating in the past. And I did that for a long time in my career. Task, even though I'm a very relationally oriented person. And it seems like when I talk with clients, this is a real light bulb moment because I've never thought of the relationship in and of itself and the dynamics of it. So, just wanted to reflect that back into our space.
I was having a conversation, and the guy I was having a conversation with, Sean Asbjørn-Hagens, a long time ago, and we were talking about the stages of sex as an example. And I think it really works as an example here.
Yeah.
And human beings can look at sex from multiple perspectives. At an early stage, I want to have sex with you, and I want to shag you. At the next level, we want to shag each other, and at the next level,
I'm not sure that there's
the best
mutual
at
understanding.
shagging. There's no better shagger than me. At that level, at the next level, it's like it begins to transmute into something different. Sex starts to become more than sex. It starts to become a way of coming together and connecting and bonding together and being together in a different way.
Yep.
And as we keep going, sex then becomes, at the later stages of development, sex becomes our relationship with reality in and of itself. That I start to see sex as a creationary process of the creation of reality itself. And I start to see that I am reality engaging with reality in a very different way. And so, we can go back to the early stages and say the same with tasks. I want to do a task. I want to get a task done. I want this to happen. We want this to happen. I'm the best at making this happen. To actually, the way it happens starts to matter. The way in which the how and the why start to really come into it, and then it becomes all about the why and the meaning that we bring to it. And so, it's like our approach to tasks can grow up, but we need to work at it. And we need to see what are we preferencing and holding on to that's no longer serving us.
Yeah, I love that.
If you were in a relationship where someone did or didn't want to shag you because that was their personal preference, the relationship's probably not going to last terribly long because it's all about them. It's all about them, right? Yeah. And so it's going to be like, hang on, where am I in this relationship? Where are we? Where's us? So it's task orientation.
I love that. I didn't expect we'd go to the stages of sex today, and I don't know that there's a mutual understanding of a desire to copulate across the riverside. But thank you, Jay.
John's a funny man. And he would often bring up these topics, and we would have these discussions when I was doing my integral coaching with him. He was the trainer, and he would just bring this stuff in that he was reading, and it's absolutely what I loved about his mind. Would go to places and he'd go, this works here, great.
Well, it's just such a brilliant analogy, isn't it? And so, like, to put it in language that people might resonate with too, you could ask yourself how many of your relationships are transactional. In other words, they only exist because of the transaction you're performing together. And, I think in business, that's true for a lot of relationships. They're transactional, and they're transactional only. And there's a little bit of fluff on the top of it where we say, we've got to have a relationship with each other. And so that might involve, let's say, quarterly coffees. And, the salesperson goes out and meets the prospect or the client or the account manager or whatever it is. And we have coffee and we believe that that's a relationship. And the reality of it is it's really nothing more than a transaction.
Yeah.
And so,
the thing that defines transaction for me is what my wife would call if-thenism. And so if-thenism. If you do this, then I'll transact. I'll give you what you want. And so that's when you're in a transaction, because you've got, you don't fulfill my need in this space, so I'm going to withdraw in this space. It's then. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. If that changes, then I'll do that. That's the nature of transaction.
Right. And then that's so interesting that you use that frame, the if then. I'd love to think about that and explore that a little more, because it implies that there's, rules or boundaries on the nature of how we are together. And then if we flip that on its head to the extreme and we say there's no boundaries, so this is an unconditional experience together, then we don't have a relationship at all, actually. We have two people that are experiencing a unity of self. And so that's some of the things that you were talking about in terms of the later stages of consciousness. And I actually don't think that works in relationships, unless the two people are incredibly well developed and unless the awakened, completely awakened. And unless the defensive structures have been completely dissolved, you will not get a boundaryless relationship. And so, I think there's going to be some nuance and some gray zone in the boundary, no boundary discussion, and in the if then space. And I'd love to figure out how we can explore that maybe in a subsequent podcast, because my cognizing at the moment is going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I haven't quite figured it out for myself yet. But I do like the starting frame of if then. That's a good one. Is there anything else that's coming up?
Yeah, for me, context really matters here, and this is what we were talking about yesterday at the program we're at. Is context really matters here, and the stages of human development. We use the term later rather than higher, because higher presupposes better. It presupposes a power hierarchy. And there are growth hierarchies which differ from power hierarchies, which later is not better but different. And so all stages of development have got application. And so to reject a stage because you don't agree with it because of its worldview means that you're not taking the enhancement and really integrating that component part of a healthy way of expressing that stage that gives us. There is a time to go, no, I want this. There's a time for it and a space for it in context. There's a time to go, what do we want? There's a time to go, what can I prove here? There's a time to go, well, can we go to a higher order level of relationship and connection through what we're doing here, or in alignment with reality? It's contextual. It depends on what's happening in context as to what our response is.
Right. Yeah, love that. Yeah. Fantastic.
For me, maturity is being able to choose a response that is aligned with the context. And you often say, and so I'll take a leaf out of your book, what does the context want from me?
Yes.
Not what do I want from the context.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Yeah, it was a big discussion yesterday, wasn't it? Centered on this, fundamental point that context really matters. And I guess just to loop it all back, relations are the context for the tasks that you're doing in your business. And so
Right.
if your relations need repair and they're ruptured, start there before you start on the tasks is always my advice, to CEOs and business
Yeah.
owners, because
Sharon Drew Morgan, relationship first, task second.
yeah,
And
100%.
the,
And
and the reason is that if we don't have rapport, we don't have relationship. If we don't have relationship, and this is really grounded, we don't have influence. If we
yeah,
don't have influence, we are not going to get the outcome we're looking for. So
yeah,
it
it's true.
always goes back to relationship first, of really
Mm.
getting and setting the foundation of rapport that builds the relationship that enables us to influence one another.
Yeah. I would go a step further even than that, Jay. And maybe this is perhaps a little too narrow for the audience, but let's try it on. I think rapport might even be overplayed a little bit. And so,
Okay.
pretty much everyone's trained on, how to build rapport in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, it becomes innate as we grow up too. Some people can do it better than others, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it misses the point that at the level of the relating itself, if the relating is healthy, you can be in or out of rapport. You can
Yeah.
agree, you can disagree. It does
Great.
not matter. It
Yeah.
actually does not matter, because you are there being with another human and you're in a process that's evolving. And so I think for me, I personally, I try to encourage my business owners, CEOs, etc., to not focus so much on whether we've got agreement on everything. It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter if we don't have agreement on everything.
Right.
What matters is that the relating is preserved
Yeah.
and repaired if it's been ruptured, and
Yeah.
that we're orienting in a given direction with intentionality in spite of our agreement or disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I focus on a lot, because, getting back to your point of perspectives, two people just aren't going to see the world the same way. They just aren't. And that's okay.
Right.
That's okay.
Of course yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kind of rapport I'm pointing to is psychological rapport, which
Mm.
enables difference.
Yeah.
It allows for us to have different views and perspectives because it's at a higher order level. It's not
Yes.
about whether we agree on something. It's not about whether we're even making eye contact with one another. It is based on, as you pointed out earlier, the quality of the relationship that we've built. We've through the basics of rapport, we've built into that relationship and taken it to the next level intentionally, enables us then to have rapport at a different level, which enables variety and difference, and actually
Yeah.
encourages it.
Okay. Take me to a specific place on that, because I'm really curious about that. I love the words that you've used. Makes sense. What about, let's say, you used psychological rapport? Was that right? Is that the two words that you used?
Yeah.
What about the level of emotionality? How important is it for two beings to be in, let's say, emotional resonance or not? What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, we prefer the word state to emotions.
State. Okay. Yep.
Emotions are an element. State is the gestalt of our emotions and our psychologics.
Yep.
So our mind, body, emotional state governs our communicating and our willingness and is held by our intentions, etc. So it's paramount. And so when we have a higher order rapport at the connection level, at the interaction level, at the seeking to understand, and we're at that openness and we're both listening to one another, then we are able to hold and tolerate differences much more powerfully. And we're able to hold and tolerate differences in states between us. So when one person has an emerging state that is shifting out of the context of the relationship, the rapport that we did have, it can be tolerated, but it can also be part of the conversation.
Well, it can be completely, it can be completely beautiful. I would say, just because one person's angry doesn't mean we all need to be angry, right?
So the other thing is the other person actually anger, or is it passion? We don't know unless we actually inquire.
Well, I think this is just really important. Maybe we finish up today, on just this little thread, because I think socially we're sort of trained that empathy would be to, almost mirror the other. So, if someone's sad, then we need to adjust our state to be sad. And this is actually quite dysfunctional in my humble opinion. If I'm quite joyous and I feel like as though I can hold your sadness with you without my state being impacted, then I believe that's the healthiest thing for me and for the relating. And so, I think, sorry?
And rare.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
it's the highest order of emotional intelligence is realizing that my state isn't actually, it doesn't need to be influenced by your state. That actually my state can hold your state. My state can govern and be with your state, but only if I'm aware of that as my intention.
Only if I'm aware of it. Yeah. And it can be difficult to do, when the other in the relationship might be experiencing lots of defensiveness or aggression or whatever it is, a survival mechanism for themselves. But it's a profound gift that you can give yourself and also the relationship. And so, if you're a business owner or a CEO looking at this and, you're curious about this stuff, I'd invite you to really reflect on how much time, energy, attention, intentionality do you actually give to your relationships themselves, vis-a-vis the tasks that you do in your business on a day-to-day basis. It's a really, I feel like as though it's a powerful reflection point, and if you want to know how to do some of this stuff, let us know in the comments below. Let us know that you've been listening and you want some help, and we're happy to jump in and share. Is there anything you wanted to leave the audience with, Jay, today, or any other threads you wanted to unfurl before we go?
Come have a conversation with us, hey?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, love that.
Good to see you, Andrew.
Excellent. Good to see you, Jay. All right, until next week, friends,